Okay, I'm pretty sure we're live. Yeah, we're live at Siftach for Coffee and Kabbalah, Parshas Matos Masei. We are right in the middle of this 3-week period of mourning, and the Blavich Rebbe says that these parshios are always read during the times of the 3 weeks, and and that teaches us that on a deeper level, there's an inherent message from these parshios, Matos and Masei, to enable us to get through and inspire us through these 3 weeks of mourning. So what is that message? What is the Matos Masei? We're going to zoom in on the names of the parshios. So first of all, welcome to everyone who's in person. Welcome to everyone who's joining and listening to this. I'm so honored to have you with me on this journey. So let's start with the names of the parshios. No, Matos Masei are not always read together. Last year they were not. They're usually read together though. And the parshios have influenced one another, specifically these two joining in the parshios influence one another in a very deep way. So let's start with the name of the parsha. Parshas Matos. In the sources, you can grab one. In the beginning of the parsha, where are we coming from? V'yedaber Moshe al Roshei Hamatos Libnei Yisrael Lemor Zeh Hadavar Asher Tzivah Hashem. So what are Matos? Moshe is speaking to the heads of the Matos. Matos literally means the tribes, right? Every year I need a stick and you already knew, on a branch. Okay, so the name Matos means tribes. So we're speaking, that's why the name of the parsha is Matos. Now, Masei means journeys, right? Matos means the travelings of. So we have the 12, we have the name of the Matos and the name of journeys, okay? Hold on to that. Now, let's just go a really quick summary of the parshios. So the parshios, we are coming back now, off of the destruction. The last parsha was the Pinchas and the plague of the Midian and Moabite women, and then many people died. Then we had the division of the land, and then the daughters of Slavchad inheriting and asking for their land, right? And then the gifts. Anyways, now Hashem commands in Matos. Hashem commands Moshe to Bnei Israel to exact revenge on which of the two evil nations that plotted against us, not Moab but Midian, which is very interesting, and it comes off the back of something that we said 2 weeks ago, in that Moab fought us not purely out of hatred for us, but out of self-defense, because they thought we're going to come through their borders and kill them. But Midian knew, the Nevuah from Bilam knew that we weren't even going to have to pass through their land, and that we were instructed not to even harm them, and yet they went out to destroy us. Bilam went out to curse us, and the daughters of Midian joined the Moabite princesses in trying to make us sin and get our downfall, even though we had no threat to them. And it came out of pure evilness, pure sinas chinam, hatred, absolutely no basis, no threat. We weren't bothering them. And therefore, now comes the commandment that we're familiar with, that Techaltsu, gather for your men, get ready for your war, arm yourself, and you have to kill every single person in Midian. The destruction of Midian comes now. It's how to, and it's on a deeper level, there's a mimer called Techaltsu on these words in this week's part 2. Techaltsu lachem, arm for yourselves, which we spoke about in other years. But just so you know that there is an entire 39 chapter, like a book, all based on this idea of Techaltsu. And what does it talk about? It speaks about our inner war against sinas chinam, which is this 3-week period. So really this war against Midian is a war on the concept of Midian being the source of which Amalek comes from. Say that Midian? If I'm not mistaken.
Ammon. No,
but Midian comes from Amalek?
Amalek comes from Esau.
Right, but I think Midian is, well, Amalek also represents sinas chinam, but Midian representing within us the hatred for another person just because they take up, for no reason, they take up space, they make me feel smaller, I want to get rid of them, I don't like them, for no reason that they did anything wrong to me, I just don't like them. And the whole mimer goes through, it's called the mimer of Avas Yisrael. It's what true love is. And the way we combat sinas chinam is with Avas chinam. That I love you not because of anything that you do for me, not because of anything that you'll give me, not because of anything I like about you. I just love, I'm gonna do love for you, unconditional love. Loving you unconditionally and doing kindness unconditionally without any reason, no rhyme or reason, right? And that's the way we combat it. And it really goes into the psychological analysis of sinas chinam and how we all have it within us. And it comes from our ego, that your greatness makes me feel smaller. That sometimes we just hate somebody because they're much better than us, or they're threatening us. They threaten our existence, and we just don't like them because something about them makes us feel less. It makes us feel smaller, and it comes from our sense of ego. And we really explore that idea in that mimer. I've never finished it. I've started it many times. And it begins with questions about why this was like Moshe's last battle. Hashem told Moshe, this is the last thing you're going to do before you die. You have to fight this war. Not Yeshua can lead. It has to be done through Moshe specifically. And there's a lot of questions given upon the Maimer. And then there's like this huge idea in Chassidus about love and the different things within our soul. And then at the end, only it answers the question. So I've never even gotten to that part because it's a very, very beautiful like Maimer. So anyways, that's just a little bit on this week's Parsha. Now, but we're going to focus more on the name of the Parsha. So the Parsha continues after this war that Hashem commands Moshe to destroy even the animals, everyone in the land of Midian. Now they're ready to go into Eretz Yisrael. But this is where Reuven, Gad, and later joined by half of Manasseh, request that not to cross over the Yarden, but to remain on the other side of the Jordan, and to have land there. And what was their reason? I brought it for you in the sources. Vayomru imna imnasa suchein bein enecha yutan es haaretz hazos lavadecha lachuza al tavirenu es hayarden. How could they? We just came off of 40 years. We just finished traveling. 40 years in the desert because the Meraglim didn't want to go into the Yarden, and now they're going to do this again. But the answer here is different, right? The answer in this week's Parsha is that Moshe said okay. And the reason, we'll skip the pages a little bit out of order. Umikne Rav, Haya Levnei Reuven, Levnei Gad, Atzuma Od. They had a lot of cattle in great numbers. But Yiruas Eretz Yazer and Gilad, they saw that the lands of the Yazer and Gilad were a suitable region for cattle, and that's why they wanted to stay there. So it seems like their reason is like it's like such a ridiculous reason. And how does Moshe answer them? So I didn't bring my.
Because it's materialistic, it's ridiculous.
It just seems, like it's not even like the Meraglim were scared of dying or they wanted to remain spiritual. So obviously there's something more to it. Clearly they're not just coming and saying like, we don't want to go cross over. Are we scared of war? What's really going on here? We want to understand that on a deeper level. Maybe we'll get to that. Should we talk about that now? So there's three levels to that. And I'm just going to show you the sources of what was different this time. So on the outset, they had a lot of cattle. It was good land for cattle. Why did Moshe agree to them? Because they said, we're not going to stay here first. First, we're going to come into Eretz Yisrael, conquer all of Eretz Yisrael with Yisrael. Only after we've conquered everything and everyone else is settled in their lands, then we'll come back here and be here. So that was different. They weren't saying we shouldn't conquer Eretz Yisrael. They weren't saying we're not going to fight, we're afraid. They're saying we want to do that, but afterwards we want to settle our cattle here because we see that it's good for our cattle. So at a very short level, that's what they said, and that was why the request was given. Hasidut says there's a lot of deeper layers. The deeper level of Hasidut was saying that what do they really want? Similar to the Meraglim, they were asking that the Meraglim weren't saying that we're afraid of the war. What they were saying was, if we remember the Hasidut, we learned that we're afraid of the materialism of Eretz Yisrael. We want to live a spiritual bubble in the Midbar where our food comes from heaven, where we could just learn Torah all day. We don't have to worry about the land, the earthliness, spending our whole existence just worrying about the materialism. We'll become absorbed by it, right? They said, Eretz ocheles yoshveh, the earthliness, Eretz is gashmius, will absorb us. We want to have a spiritual existence. So the Reuven actually felt the same thing, but they came from it from a very different approach. They said, we know that the ultimate, like we learned from the Meraglim, is to live a material life and bring Kedusha into the materialism, and we understand that, but there's also a place for people who sit and learn Torah. Just like Zevulun and Yisachar and Zevulun in Mitzrayim, even there was Shevet Levi, we want to be those people that remain in that spiritual existence to uphold that connection to Torah, and be shepherds, right? Like all the Avos chose to be shepherds, to remain more spiritual. And we still understand, though, that the priority, that the main avodah in this world is to work the earth and to be involved. And that's why we're going to first conquer the land. We're not going to do this until afterwards. We understand that the main thing is to be in Eretz Yisrael, to be with the land. But we still want to have that place of Kedusha, of like that utopia, that yeshiva space. We want the yeshiva to be there. And therefore, because they understood that balance and that need, and the need for settling them, but also the need to have a place of a spiritual oasis, therefore they were granted that. So it was actually a balance or a batikun for the Meraglim were asking, was being able to, it's like really the elements of compromise. It's saying like, yes, there's not one way or another way. We actually really need the both of them. We learned from everyone in their life, from Yaakov. Even Yaakov, he went to down into the world to make a family, but before he stopped in Shiva Shem Aver. So we have a period in our lives where Yoshed Olim, and then we come out into the world. So, and every single day we enter the world, but we can't just be consumed with earthliness. We first have to stop in the morning and daven and connect spiritually to remove ourselves from the world a little bit, and then only can we engage in the world. So they understood that balance. So that was the Hasidic idea of it. I want to just pull up the words that they said, because you'll see in the words that it was very different than the Meraglim said. Al Tavirein was a Yarden. Actually, the next psukim don't say anything. Umikne Rav, and it skips a little bit. And they wanted to stay. Now, of course, it crashed. So I'll get to the deeper. The next. Oh, there we go. They said, so Moshe said to them, he answered them, you want your brothers to go to war and you just stay here? And they said, and he said, like, and then he said, you'll turn the hearts of Bnei Israel from wanting to go if you stay. So he said, this is what your fathers did. And that's when you're the Meraglim. This is what they did. What do you think you're doing, right? And he goes on and he got very upset and Hashem was incensed. He's quoting how Hashem was so angry when that happened. And they let him speak and he says the whole thing. And he says, now you want to do the same thing. You replace your father. You're going to bring the wrath of Hashem against us. So what did they say? They came here and they said, no, that's not what we meant at all. We're going to build here sheepfolds for our flocks and for our children. We're going to be the first. We're going to arm ourselves and be at the front of the war with Bnei Israel. And we're not going to return to our home. No nashuv el beitenu ad yisnachel bnei Israel ish nachlaso. Until everyone else settles their home, not just till the wars are over. Until they all have their home and their nachla, we're not going to come back here. Ki lo ninchal ita me'ever yarden v'hala ki ba nachlasenu elenu me'ever hayarden mizracha. So because this is where we receive our share. So Moshe said, if you do this and you techaltzu and you go to battle before Hashem and every single one of you crosses the Yarden and we conquer the land and everyone settles, then you're fine. But if you don't do that, then the sin is on you, right? Then you could build now. So now you could build the towns and you can do what we said. So this is a huge part of the parsha that consumes this. Now there's an even deeper, beautiful idea in this message that I heard from a Chassidic story. That I don't have the source in the Torah for this, but there's a beautiful Chassidic story where a man, a tzaddik in Russia, had a chassid, in Eastern Europe somewhere, had a chassid who asked his Rebbe to go to Eretz Yisrael, and the Rebbe didn't want him to. He said he wants to make Aliyah, he wants to move to Eretz Yisrael, and the Rebbe just didn't, and he yearned for it. But later on, a little while later, he became sick, and it was clear that his end was near. So the Rebbe came to him and said, if you want to go to Eretz Yisrael, I'll give you permission. And he said, no, I don't want to go. He said, what do you mean? What changed? He said that clearly this chassid was a big tzaddik. He said that you're going to die soon, and you're going to be buried here, not in Eretz Yisrael. And he said, and in the parsha, where Reuven, Gad, and Chati Menashe, and I brought this for you in the last source, wanted to stay in the other side of the midbar, they said, Umikne Rav, Hayu Livnei Reuven, Livnei Gad, Atimod. They had a lot of mikne. They had a huge amount of cattle. Now, he says that those words, you can actually read deeper into them, that in a deeper understanding of the words, they were saying that mikne could also mean a kinyan. They had an acquisition. They made a kinyan on their Rav. Umikne Rav, Hayu Livnei Reuven, Livnei Gad, Atzum Me'od. They had an intense kinyan on their Rav. Their Rav was Moshe Rabbeinu, and they made this intense kinyan on their Rav, Uvnei Reuven, Atzum Me'od, so intensely, and they said, this is the Makom of Mikneh, this is the place where our Rav is going to be, and our Rav Moshe is not going to cross into the Yarden. Our Rav Moshe is going to stay here and be buried here, and we don't want to go to Eretz Yisrael until Moshe comes with us. So we want to be buried here and die here with Moshe Rabbeinu until Moshe resurrects and comes to Eretz Yisrael. We won't go into Eretz Yisrael without him. And he said, I feel the same way, that you're my Rav, you're my Rebbe, you're going to die here and be buried here, and I want to be buried here with you and only go into Eretz Yisrael when Mashiach comes with you, my Rebbe. And that's what happened. His Rebbe died. This man got better. The Rebbe died, and he stayed there until his already passed away and was buried there. So obviously this story is like, first of all, it gives me chills, but to see that from that deeper idea, that maybe on an even deeper level, Reuven, Gad, and Chatzi Menashe had this kinyan atzum ma'od on the Rav and Moshe Rabbeinu, to say that Moshe is our leader, and we don't want to go into Eretz Yisrael without you. And that love that they had for him, for Moshe Rabbeinu, made them want to come back and stay and say, we're going to come when you come into Eretz Yisrael. We're going to be buried. We were going to be buried where you're buried, right on that side. And what ended up happening positively from this is that when Mashiach comes, in the map that I brought last week that we colored in with the Shvatim, we see that Eretz Yisrael is actually going to expand to those lands. Right now, those lands are Syria, Jordan, right? Syria and Jordan, if I'm not mistaken. When Mashiach comes, the actual Eretz Yisrael is going to expand to a huge part. There's going to be 3 more lands. We took 7 nations lands, and it says that Cani, Kenizi, and Kadmoni were then the nations that were on the other side of the Jordan, the other side of that Jordan, which are now Syria, Jordan, and I forget which other country. And when Mashiach comes, those are going to be part of Eretz Yisrael, with the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael, and there's even an Orei Miklat that's going to be built there. So one of the testaments we have for that is that one of the Orei Miklat hasn't been built yet. It's going to be there when Mashiach comes. So we had this expansion of Eretz Yisrael even from this idea. So that's a part of, like, a good historical part of this week's parsha. What? the city of refuge. Our miklat is we have a miklat in our house as a refuge. It's where someone who killed someone by mistake could run for refuge, and he wouldn't be allowed to be killed there. And the family, because the family of someone who killed someone by mistake is allowed to take vengeance on him, on the murderer, on the accidental murder. But if he runs to an Ori miklat, he's safe there, and the family can't take vengeance on him. And it's the cities.
So when you say that even miklat is going to be
That there's one Ori miklat that the Torah says that there's going to be 10, and there's only 9 built, and the Torah says that there's another one that's going to be built on that side, and that's a proof that Mashiach is going to come, and that because that Eretz Yisrael will expand and the Mashiach will come, because there still hasn't been an Ori, that 10th miklat built.
Didn't Moshe build 3 before he passed away?
Maybe
Yeah, that was the whole thing. That Moshe built 3 before he passed away, and that
in those
showed-
lands.
Yeah, and
Makes
that
sense.
was that was proof for us of learning. Like just because you're not going to
Yeah.
finish a task doesn't mean
That
you
shouldn't start it.
begin
Yeah,
So I guess there are
Yeah.
already 3 in that area. Right.
that makes sense. Okay, now we're going to go to the name of the parsha. Okay, so we said that Matos is the tribes, the Shvatim. That's how we refer to them. Matos has a second meaning. It also means a mateh, which means a stick, right? If you look it up, even a staff or a stick. And there's 2 different terminologies that were used, and we're going to dig into this meaning of the word mateh, matos, because the name of the parsha tells us a lot about the essence of the parsha. Okay, did you find me a stick? Okay, you don't have to. Every week I want this. We did this last year, right?
Yeah, I remember this.
So there's another name for the Shvatim, which are Shvatim. So the tribes have 2 names. They're either called Matos or they're called Shvatim, a Mateh or a Shevet. And the difference between them is very subtle. And what's interesting is that the word Shevet means the tribes, the 12 Shvatim, but Shevet also means a rod or a staff. So both Shevet and Mateh both mean staffs. Now, where does this come from? One of the reasons is that the leaders of the tribes were distinguished by their Mateh, right? We have Mateh Aaron, Mateh Moshe. Each of the leaders had their own magical, oh, thank you. You're amazing. I just need this. Each of the leaders were distinguished by their own staff. So they all had a Mateh that they would use, and they each looked different. And Moshe's was covered in rubies and sapphires, and was actually had written the names of the Avos, Imahos, and even the Pilakshot, Bilhah and Zilpah, right? And so the difference, so what is the difference between a mateh and a shevet? Literally. So we learn that the shevet is a branch when it's still connected to the tree or recently removed from the tree. So this is a shevet, right? That would be one of these. So this is a shevet. It's a piece of wood, a branch of a tree, while it's on the tree or even removed from the tree. It still looks like a branch. A mateh is once it's been hardened and fashioned into a stick, when it's no longer a branch that you could crack off of a tree. And the difference between them is even a little bit more, that a shevet is more flexible, more breakable. It's much easier to break. You can break a branch from a tree, but later on, after it's weathered. So what happens to make it a mateh is that once it detaches from the tree and it's not receiving the nourishment from the tree, it becomes hardened, harder and harder. The longer it's detached from the tree, it becomes hardened by the weathers that it has to go through, the storms, the winds, the earth, the dust, the movement. All of that hardens it to the point that it's much, much harder to break a stick that's been detached from a tree for a long time. So a mateh is more removed from the tree, and it's more hard, and it's harder to break. So we learn that those represent two different types of stages of Bnei Israel. Sometimes we're like a shevet. Sometimes we're connected to our Ilan. The Ilan is the source of all. It says that the Eitz HaChaim, the Ilan is and above is the source of all neshamos. So when we're connected to the Ilan above, when we're connected to the source above, we're called shevet. So the difference in the Torah is sometimes it calls us a shevet, sometimes it calls us a mateh. We learn it depending on how our connection is. If our connection to our source is visible, and you can see that this is a branch, and you can see its connection to a tree, if we're visible that we're connected to our source, to Hashem, to the source of our life, we're called a shevet. If we're more removed, we're far away, if we've been cast away in Galus, or we've been sent into a shlichus, or we've gone through a lot, and our connection to our source of life is not as apparent, we're called a mateh. Now, it would seem that a shevet is the preferable way to be, is a more connected source, spiritually speaking, that you'd much rather be a shevet because you're connected to your source. But we actually learn that the shevet is lacking something that the mateh doesn't have. And although a mateh seems to be like we're far from our source, we're far from the tree that we come from, a mateh is the one that's stronger. The mateh is the one that if they're both in a storm, if there's a bad weather and there's a storm, the shevet is going to break very easily and snap, and the mateh is going to be able to withstand even the harshest temperatures, the harshest weathers, and it's not going to be broken by what comes at it because it's been distanced. And that's only possible because of the distance and because of what it's gone through and because the distance it has from the tree and the time it's been apart and become stronger. That's what allows it to resist all of the weathers that face them. So we actually learn that there's an advantage to both of them, and there's not one greater than the other, but in truth the mateh is the one that's going to survive the long term. It's the one who's going to survive whatever's thrown at it, all the challenges. What?
More resilient.
Right, more resilient. Like, this is a small thing, but it's much, I could still break it, but it's definitely more resilient and more strong than a measly stick like this. So the flexibility and the shevet's advantage is that it has flexibility, right? It's still softer, it's permeated by its source, it's nourished more, it can grow more, and the mateh has that unfailing firmness, the unbreakable and unshakable strength. So this is reflected in the name of the parsha of Mateh, and it's amazing. The Rebbe says that we always read about this specifically during the 3 weeks, and this message is so powerful that I guess we'll call it a shevet is a rod and a mateh is a branch or a staff. And we learn that individually we all have this idea within us as well, and we'll connect it soon to the 3 weeks. Individually, we all begin as a shevet. Every neshama comes from the tree of life. If we draw the 10 spheros, which I've drawn many times before, that is referred to as the tree of life. The source of all neshamas come through those spheros and come down into this world. Now, as a neshama comes from the tree of life, before the neshama comes down, she's one with the tree of life. And when she comes down at the beginning of her journey, she's still a shevet. She's still connected to her source. She's still a baby, a little child. We still feel the connection to the higher worlds. And the more she lives in this world, the more weathers, the more things the neshama goes through, the more connected to the earth that the neshama comes to, the more she grows into a mateh and comes from a shevet into a mateh. And we see that the neshama, we become less spiritually sensitive. We don't feel our source of life all the time. And although it seems negative that we become so spiritually distanced and more hardened and more tougher and more distant from the source of all life, nevertheless, by weathering all the storms of life and going through all the challenges that we go through and all the things that beat us up, in the end, the stick hardens and becomes strong enough to be able to weather all the storms of life. So somebody who is sheltered their entire life, if a parent would shelter their entire child and never expose them to any challenge, not allow them to fall. We see that, like, doctors will say that you're actually harming your child when they see a parent. Someone in the shir last week was just saying that works in Tipat Chalav, and there was a parent who wasn't even letting their child do the test in Tipat Chalav on their own, because they were didn't want them to get it wrong and they didn't want them to make a mistake. And she was like, you're disabling your child. Then she had to figure out a way to tell the parents, because when we don't let our kids fall off the playground and make mistakes and learn and climb and be weathered by storms, and when we don't let our children fall and we don't let them go out into the world and be tested by the world and make friends that are the wrong friends and have difficulties with their friendships and go through that, we're actually crippling them, because we're not allowing them to be weathered. And it's hard because there are children, we don't want to see them being beat up by the storms, but that is what they need to become a shevet, to become a mateh, to be strong enough to weather life. We want them to be strong and resilient and be able to learn. They're going to learn the skills they need to overcome those challenges only if we let them experience them on their own and hold their hand and support them while letting them experience that. So yes, the shevet is attached, but it represents more immature connection, like a child connected in the womb. While it's beautiful, we don't want the child to be connected in the womb forever. We want them to be able to detach and have that space to be able to make their own mistakes and face difficulties and challenges, and through that become resilient and become stronger so that they can face the harder challenges that will come later on, the bigger weathers that will come on later in life. We see a lot of examples of this. First of all, we see it in Eretz Yisrael, that Israelis, if you're a Jew that never lived in Israel and you move to Israel, you will see that there's a difference between Israelis and other Jewish people. I mean, for the most part, that the Israelis are tougher. They're called sabras. They're tougher on the outside. They're pushy. They're demanding. They're very forceful. They'll speak their mind. They'll be much more, but they're also more resilient. And what made that, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, what makes Israelis so tough on the outside and so unbreakable and so struff. I mean, when we moved here, my husband had never been in Israel before, and he was didn't even know what this is 10 years ago when we got married. We did Shan Rishon in Israel, and my husband came back. He's like, I couldn't get on the bus. Just everyone was pushing and the driver was yelling, and I just couldn't get onto the bus. And I was like, yeah, my kids get it. Yeah, they all get it. Yeah. So it's like when you come to Israel, you're just first you're like, why are they like this? And then you realize that what we've had to go through as a nation, first of all, and what they've had to go through in building, in living in Israel, to fighting all the opposition that we have, and all of just living on the edge of terror and knowing that anything can happen in every moment, and being like a little child being told on a bus, you can't, pink backpack is dangerous, growing up with what we have to grow up with, it toughens us from a little kid having to know about a bomb shelter, having to know about pikuim, just even nowadays, but especially like in the olden days, what the Israelis had to overcome to live in this country, we understand why they're sabras, why they're so tough on the outside, why they could face anything, and we have to be that way because now we know that we're the ones who are ready for anything thrown at us, right? We're hicholtzu, we're ready and armed. Right when COVID came, we were like the first ones. Everyone was copying our model because we're always ready for the next challenge thrown at us. For right or wrong, right? But we're always ready and armed for the next calamity because we're not like nothing's gonna get us down. We're not gonna like fall on our face like from the smallest thing because we've had to go through so much. So like a war comes, we're not gonna like go into utter chaos and panic, right? So we see that with Israelis. We see it with friendships that there's immature. The Shevet represents the more soft, connected, right? A friendship that is a newer friendship that has never faced challenges together. Those friendships might not stick it out in the long run if something hard happens, right? But if a friendship has tested difficulties over time and you've gone through struggles together and you've supported one another and you face painful things, like sometimes friendships have to face where one friend has children while the other cannot, or one friend gets married while the other cannot, or one has to lose God forbid lose something that the other one has. When one could face that and overcome that and retain their friendship, and when they can face arguments or differences in politics or differences in so many things, one could sorry if I said anything trigger, when we could face painful things together, that friendship becomes, rather than in that conflict breaking apart, it ends up becoming a resilient friendship that can test the weathers of distance and time and struggles. And even more so in a relationship, right? In a marriage, a lot of times in the beginning of the marriage, it's new, it's fresh, it seems like you're in love. And then a marriage later on, you might not see that like initial passion and that spark and that like holding hands all day and doing everything together. But you might see a resilience at a newer marriage that hasn't even faced a single fight yet, that hasn't faced any struggles yet, hasn't faced any challenges. Although it seems fresh and beautiful, that marriage is more fragile. It can be, when a wind comes, it can break and bend. Whereas a marriage that has overcome struggle, that there's been difficulties, that there's been arguments, there's been really, really, really tough times, there's been rock bottom, there's been tears, and there's been the ups and downs, and then they've managed to overcome that and stay together. With that marriage at the end is the one that when a really, really big test comes, that marriage can hold itself together and it won't be fragile and bend and break at the slightest wind because they've overcome a challenge together, right? And in our lives as well, we see that as we mature and the more challenges that we face throughout our lives, and as we go through more and more in life, the more we won't fall apart at the same things that may have broken us to pieces when we were younger, and we would face a challenge and we would just break down. Later on, once we face more, once we become more resilient, once we know that we have the toughness and we have the courage and we have the strength and we have the emunah, right, and we have the faith and all of the support that we need to get past this, we'll be less taken down by the next challenge that comes our way. So there's a strength and advantage in being a matzah and overcoming things, and we'll continue this thought. So in truth, we actually need these challenges, which in the moment seem negative and seem destructive and seem frustrating and seem so upsetting and chaotic. When you're in a storm, it's chaotic. But afterwards, we can see how powerful we become from it, how much more strong we become from the storm once the storm is done. And the true magic is to have the higher vision that in the moment of the chaos, in the moment of the conflict, in the moment of the destruction, like in the Beis HaMikdash, right? In the Yerida, which is usually a Yerida for Letzorach Aliyah. We say that the storm, we can either look at it as that this storm is a Yerida, the challenges I'm facing, to make me stronger afterwards. But the truth is, the Rebbe said that this is like a really powerful idea, that it's not just a Yerida Letzorach Aliyah, that the Yerida itself, in the moment of the chaos, that is the growth itself. It's not just, we have to overcome this because later it'll be good. In the Yerida itself, in the challenge, this is where the growth is happening. This is the moment that if we can turn into higher vision and look at it from a way our highest self can see it, we would say, oh, this is what I need to happen, and I need this needs to be happening right now, because in this I'm going to find something really great and something really powerful. And the aliyah is already here. There's an aliyah in this moment as well. For example, and the greatest example of this is in the 3 weeks, because now we're speaking about this time when we're mourning the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, the beginning of destruction, the breakdown of the Beis HaMikdash, right? The 3 weeks begin with the fast of the 17th of Tammuz, when the walls where there was a siege around Yerushalayim, and 3 weeks later when they finally destroyed the Beis HaMikdash. And although it's a terrible time, Chassidus looks at it from a deeper idea, this beautiful concept that if you have a home and you want to build an even bigger home, right? You have a home, but you need a larger home to fit your family and more guests. And you break down, your bulldozers come and they start smashing your house. A little kid would be like traumatized, like, why are they breaking my home? And an adult would say, no, 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 this is good, because we're having an even bigger home. So temporarily we're going to be sent away from our home, and the child might be like confused and feel like it's chaotic, and they're ruining my house, and they're unpacking, where are they taking all my stuff, right? But an adult looks at it and sees that even though the big house isn't here yet, even though my dream home hasn't been built yet, and my little home is being destroyed, even in the destruction of the home, I'm happy that this is happening, because I can't have a bigger home until they take away the small home to build a new one on the place, right? I can't rebuild. And that's the highest vision. And the Rebbe said in the Beis HaMikdash, the reason that Hashem destroyed the Beis HaMikdash is because the third Beis HaMikdash is going to be infinitely more great than the second one, because the second one had limitations, and the third one's going to be forever, and it's going to include everybody, and it's going to bring Tfias Amesim, and it's going to change, not just have one space of holiness where corruption is happening around it, but it's going to change the actual state of the entire world, where everyone will be able to see the vision from that vision. It won't just be an island of Gnisim surrounded by perversion. It's going to be an effect in the fiber, ruining us to the home I grew up in. That's only memories tied to this home. Of course, there's like sadness attached to it, but even amongst the sadness and the discomfort of having to move away and temporarily live somewhere else and be taken away from your home, there's a hope and an excitement for what's to come. So we're able to somehow see that, and that takes very high vision, right? But it's easier with our own home. But when the Beis HaMikdash is destroyed and it feels like Hashem is rejecting us, it's so hard. But we could be able to elevate ourselves and say, no, Hashem loves us so much. He wants us to have the third Beis HaMikdash. So He's doing us a favor, and He's bringing us to a higher level. And yes, it's painful. We're being relocated for a while, and while this new home is being built. And yes, we're gonna have to collect all of the, sometimes buildings pauses for a bit, renovations, so that we could make more money and afford the rest of the building. So sometimes we have to, and make more mitzvot, so we can build more bricks in the Beis HaMikdash. But that's done now, right? And that's ready. And now we're just taking that annoying time for that. Now it feels like that time where it's frustrating because the contractor is taking forever, and like production. There was the trade stuff, they can't get the materials that we need, whatever it is, right? It's frustrating, but we're still so hopeful, and we're excited, and we're looking forward to our new home. So we could see that even in this time of disruption, that's how Rabbi Akiva was able to be joyful and say, look, I see. That was Rabbi Akiva's perspective. He had that high vision, that he was laughing at the destruction. He said, no, I see that the Nevi'im said that first there's going to be destruction, then there'll be the third base, the Mashiach. So this is amazing. Now we're finally getting to the destruction period so that we could get to the third Beis HaMikdash period. It takes such great vision to see that, and especially in our own lives, when we're seeing destruction happen in our own life, and to see like someone losing a job, or physically losing their home, or losing a marriage, or losing something so like against their own will, or someone losing something, and being able to see it as this is obviously destruction. Hashem only destroys in order to create something greater. That the destruction is a yerida letzorach aliyah, like the seed germinating in order to grow a tree. That we have to be able to see that vision in that moment is the hardest. That to see that even in the destruction moment, it's a positive. It's taking something down in order to build again, to build something even more positive and even greater and stronger. So that's a lesson from the Matzah. And that is why the Rabbi says we always read this during the time of the 3 weeks to remind us in this painful time that we are mourning, but we're filled with more and more hope that Mashiach is even closer. And that these times are actually the most opportune times for Mashiach to come. There's very, very high energy in this time. It's like the Esav energy that can either go to, that if like Esav could have used the energy to get even higher than Yaakov, but if we use it for the wrong things, it's such a sensitive time, and we have to. And the way we counter what ended up going south for us every single time the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, it was on the back of Sinas Chinam, like Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. There was always something that caused the destruction from hatred for no reason. So what we can do during this time, as an action thing, is to increase as much as possible with Avas Chinam, to look for any way we can to give love, and even if we don't have time or the resources to give what we wish we could give, right? To go to a random person to, buy somebody something, or donate our time in the hospital because we have other things. We can still freely give of love by finding any person we see and smiling at them and giving them a compliment. You have no idea how far it goes. Just stopping and saying, you should just know how much I appreciate, or how good you look, or how nice that makes you look, or how beautiful that looks on you. You can just give love. You don't know them and there's no reason to love them, but you can give love and lift somebody up in so many ways by sending a message to somebody just thinking about you, and how, a positive compliment every time we pass through the gate, saying something kind to the people who stand at the gate and open it for us, being able to, when you walk through the mall and there's a shomer, when someone's working in a store, just stopping and being kind to anyone who looks down, just going over and going out of our way to lift somebody up for absolutely no reason. You see that video going around? There was in France where there was like a man he was a street performer, but he was gonna kill himself. He poured a bottle of kerosene on himself, and then he took a match out, and he's like in a busy street in Paris, and everyone is just staring at him. And then this from kid, this Chabad kid, comes running and smacks, which is very dangerous because he had kerosene all over him, and he had a match, and he was about to strike it, and he like smacks his hand down and takes the match, and then he goes with the man and starts like talking to him and like putting his arm around him. He's heading, and this kid is 16 years old, and this man is like in his 20s. He looks,
He wasn't afraid to touch this.
and he wasn't afraid to just like to be like soothing to this man, and this man literally, everyone is just like staring at them and looking at each other, taking out their phones and filming this, and this Jew comes running out of nowhere. Like, that's Avas Chinam, that's what's going to build the Beis Mikdash. It was such a beautiful, it was going all over the news, and this guy ended up being someone who has billions of followers online. He's a street performer, but to see the reactions of people who he was just like I had it all, I'm done, and like pouring like, and like it was just amazing. So he ended up sharing this like millions of times to millions of billions of people. But a Kiddush Hashem. But that Sinas Chinam is and a danger to himself. It was mamash, yeah.
He had t-shirts on and his shorts on. He could have been moving differently, but because he was identified as a Jew.
Yeah. It's true. He looked like a Jew. He was definitely a Jew. He could have looked like didn't have to be dressing like a Jew in Paris. It's very dangerous.
He could have a baseball cap.
Yeah, it's true. I looked him up after. His name is Mendel something, so I was like, I'm pretty sure he's Chabad. He's a cute. Yeah, it was very sweet. His parents should be really proud. So the way that we counteract that, and now connection to Masei. So Matos Masei have an intense. When they're together, there's an even greater message that we learn from this, because Masei is the journey and the growth that comes from the Matos. Matos represents the struggles or the weathers that come and toughen us and make us hard, the challenges that life throws at us. And Masei, right, we see the Rebbe says that we see this idea of the Yerida L'Tzorach Aliyah, or the Yerida being the Aliyah itself, specifically when these parashas are read together. Because when you read Masei, right, Parashas Masei,
Is it like doing? Masei is like
travels. Look, let's go to Masei. Masei
Masei
is,
from, like,
we're in the end of Bamidbar, right?
Like
Masa, exactly. Like Masa, the organization, the travels. Masa. So Bamidbar, the beginning, the very, very first pasuk in Masei says, Eila Masei b'nei Yisrael. This is crazy. Asher yatsu me'eretz Mitzrayim. These are the journeys of the Jewish people. Asher yatsu, that they left me'eretz Mitzrayim, litziv osam, troop by troop, v'yad Moshe v'Aaron. Right? And there's the Mefarshim all ask the question, what do you mean the journeys? These are the journeys of Bnei Yisrael when they left Mitzrayim. And then he begins to say the journeys. That first they left Mitzrayim and they went to Ramses. I'll look it up. But
Refidim or something, right? That was
Refidim?
Yeah.
Makes sense. So it goes through each of the places that they went to. And the question is, why use plural? Elam Masei, this is the journey. How many journeys did the Bnei Yisrael take out of Mitzrayim? There was one journey out of Mitzrayim, and then there were more journeys to get from Mitzrayim to Eretz Yisrael. But these are the journeys that they left Mitzrayim. That's a very unusual thing. So the Mefarshim have a lot to say about this. What do you mean these are the journeys, right? Vayichtav Moshe, and Moshe wrote these down. Vayisume Ramses, right? They left Ramses on the first, on the 15th on Pesach, and they went to Ramses to Sukkos. Okay. And then Migdal, etc. And then it lists, and Moshe now, this is like the ending of before Devarim comes, Moshe is now listing every single one of their 42 journeys that they listed. So we learned something really powerful from this idea of the plural term for one traveling. That we're actually not talking about, we're not only speaking about Bnei Yisrael, the journeys of Bnei Yisrael leaving Egypt, we're speaking about something much deeper here. The Baal Shem Tov says that we're talking about every single Jew. Leaving Mitzrayim means leaving a narrow place, leaving a constriction. And when you leave a constriction, there's many journeys, because when you leave a narrow place, every time you leave, if you're in a confined state of mind and you're able to overcome that, and you reach a place of minametzar el merchav, and you reach expansiveness, and you get past your limitation. Let's say you get past, but now, because we're infinite human beings, because we have infinite potentials of growth, once we've left that limitation, that new level becomes limiting for us. If we would stay at that next level forever, we would feel limited. For example, if you get a raise, you're in a job, even though it was your dream job, if you stay in that same position forever, you're gonna feel stuck, because by definition, humans, as opposed to angels, are finite. Angels are called omdim. It says many times the malachim are called the omdim. They stand. What does that mean? Omdim. It means that they can only stay in one level. And humans are called mahalchim. I'm getting this from halacha. That through halacha, through the Torah and keeping the mitzvahs in the Torah, we can be mahalchim, which means we can constantly go higher. The malachim are not capable of that. Even though they're in Gan Eden, they're in perfection. They're in a plateau, and they reach the highest level they can reach, and they can't go higher. Which is why we do mitzvahs. I mean, which is why malachim will come down to this world like, oh wow, in the world we could be a mahalech. There's no end to our growth, and if there was an end to our growth, life would feel so suffocating and limiting if you knew that like this is it, I reached the top and I could never grow anymore. Like I got to the capacity of the greatest I could be. There's no more for me. That's where great people, rich people realize it's the end for them. They can't live anymore. If they're like, I reached my ultimate, and now what? There has to be a new goal. Everyone has to be able to have a new goal. That's the masculine inside of us. Everyone is built masculine and feminine. The masculine inside of us is that drive, we said, the arrow to constantly grow. And it's part of the spiral, the circle keeps us present and saying it's not only about getting higher, it's also about being in the present, in the journey, in the struggles, and knowing that in the present there's where to grow from. But the masculine gets us to know that no matter where we are, as soon as we get to that next level of growth, that is soon going to become, very, very soon going to become limiting for us. That's going to become the new Mitzrayim for us, because now we're capable of new growth. So if I reached a level, even in weights, we see this in everything in our lives. If I'm able to lift a certain amount of weight, that's going to be limiting for me. If I can't reach a new level, I'm going to feel like, okay, now that's easy for me. If I reach a level of running, if I'm running only half a kilometer, if I'm running 5 kilometers, it's not going to be growth for me anymore. I'm going to feel stuck if I can't get past that, because anything that becomes growth for me is now limiting for me in the next level, right? We understand that. So growth is infinite, and therefore there's 42 journeys, he says. Every single neshama comes down to this world and has infinite growth, but there's 42. This is really amazing. The teaching of Baal Shem Tov is that in our life, we each have 42 journeys to get to our mission in life. And these 42 journeys, in each one of the journeys of Bnei Israel, there was a challenge and a struggle, something that had to be discovered along the way. Each place that they stopped, there was a name, there was something that happened, there was a plateau, a stopping, an encampment. The encampments often feel like setbacks in our life. It's like when we're not growing anymore, whenever we stop. And what's crazy, another question in this week's Parsha, is that we talk about the 42 journeys, but then we say here are the journeys of Bnei Israel, but what does he describe? Not their journeys, he's describing their encampments, their stops. Well, like that makes no sense. Say these are the 42 encampments of Bnei Israel, not the 42 journeys. Their journeys are when they traveled, and the encampments are when they camped. So we actually learned that the encampments very often are the times in our life when we feel like, okay, we stopped growing. Like I have to take a break now. I'm on pause. Like I'm not working. I'm not advancing. And that feels like sometimes and stopping to our journey. But the Baal Shem Tov says, no, that is where the real journey is. The real journey is not like when things are moving and you're just continuing to go in your path of life. The real journeys are when there's a setback on the way, when there's an encampment, when you have to stop and recharge your spirits, when you're pausing on the way. That is a journey as well. Those are your journeys, because that's sometimes where you find Hashem sending you to those places. That's where you're going to find in each of those 42 places, you're going to find something essential and vital to you getting to your ultimate growth. And in each of those setbacks and those encampments where you're like, oh, now we have to stop. No, we're not just have to stop. You need to stop, because in this encampment, there's going to be something you're going to discover, something you're going to uncover, something you're going to grow from. You're going to learn something here. You're going to elevate something here. You're going to encounter and meet somebody here, something here that's going to be vital before you get to the next level of this game, right? Of this traveling. So the encampments are actually part of the journeys themselves. And that's why sometimes when we have to take a pause from hosting or a pause from work, or we're like, oh, now I'm pregnant, I can't do anything. In those encampments, rather than feeling frustrated that we now have to pause and recharge, or sometimes when we need a break doesn't mean that I'm not growing. A break might mean that this is part of my growth, that in order to continue journey, I need to reach this plateau. There's a complete cycle like the moon of growth and diminishing, and it's part of this journey. The moon is constantly cycling. So when we feel like we took a few steps back, doesn't necessarily mean that we're falling backwards. It might mean that that's just the direction that we're going in right now. And if you look at the Bnei Israel's journey in the desert, it was intentionally in this twisted way where they go backwards and forwards and turn around. And it could be so frustrating, but I feel like that was like put into our DNA to teach us that life is going to be like that. We're not just going to go from here to here where we want to get to. We're going to go here and backwards and forwards, and that's part of the journey, and that's where you have to get to in order to get there, right? You're going to need to go through all those things, and they're going to take you even further, because you don't know. You want to get from here to here, but you don't know where you're actually meant to be. So rather than being frustrated, it's being about trusting the process. So it's a balance of the arrow of the Rebbe says that there's, in our journey in life, there's 2 mistakes that people make. Okay, catch this. One is that people think that they grew enough and that's it. That they're at the highest they could be. That like I made it to Eretz Yisrael, I made Aliyah, I'm happy where I'm at. It's being complacent where you're at and thinking that there's no more room to grow. Thinking that like you make a goal for yourself of how firm and how like connected you want to be, then you reach it and that's where you get to. That's a big mistake because when something stays and is standing for one place and then omdim, and when we're stuck at a plateau and we feel like this is it starts to smell. When water stays flat and it's not moving, when things don't move, that's it. It starts to stink. Even if it's a great place, if you're not moving, even if you're moving backwards, right? It's better than not moving at all, just being complacent. So when someone reaches complacency and is just stuck at a plateau for like and thinks that there's no more room to grow, it's a big pitfall. Yeah, sure.
So when we made Aliyah, I wrote to Rabbi Matos Masei, who's the Divrei Torah was following by email.
Please speak a little louder. I can't hear you.
So Rabbi Kahana, I wrote to him, Rabbi Kahana will need Aliyah, and he responds to me, Giveret Esther.
Yeah.
I really hope to hear someday how Aliyah made you.
How Aliyah made you what?
How it made you.
Aliyah made you. Not that I
made Aliyah. Yeah, 100%. So in the Rebbe's words, he says that the mistake is to think, to believe that one has arrived. He thinks I got there. Right, I reached so far in my Judaism, I can rest now, content. The truth is that a Yid was not created to stand still. Right? There's always a new journey, and that's what Matos Masei b'nei Israel. That whatever level you're on, you never got there. There's another journey. We're Mahalchim. There's always another level that you need to grow.
Life is a process.
Life is a process.
Journey.
Yeah.
Meaning, like we know, life is we get things hit us, we get things, we
That's
give
what our
things
kids are
the whole time. I mean, it's like it's such a Hashem is the ultimate psychotherapist because everything He's created is all Shabbat, Tarat Mishpacha, Shiva. Everything is stop.
Yeah.
And feel, you know,
and be present.
Know that be present in the moment. And it's a process. You know, it's a
100%.
It's like unbelievable.
Yeah.
And it's like Hashem is like, you know, Freud when you're nothing.
Exactly.
Hashem's got it.
Exactly. So the Rebbe said that there's the two main mistakes is that either someone thinks I've arrived and that's it,
right?
And then for him we have to say no, Masei. You've never arrived. There's always another journey.
Right.
Wherever you camp, there's another journey coming up ahead, right? There's another journey. Just know that there's another room for growth. If you think you've arrived, you're big mistaken, my dear, right? And the other one is to despair. That someone says like I'm not moving. I feel so little. My efforts are in vain. No matter how much I try, I feel like I'm not making progress. There's no journey I'm not moving anywhere. And to feel like your progress is so little. And for that person, we say matos, right? We say to him that even a single journey is liberation from some personal Egypt, from some Meitzar. That even the direction that you're going, right? Even if it has to move backwards, that's even a tiny little thing is still a masei. Some of the journeys were tiny little steps, were tiny encampments. And even if you're in an encampment stage, even if you feel like you're trying so hard, but you're stuck in this space right now, that's okay because that's part of the journey as well. So you're journeying as well, even if you have to rest, even if you need a pause, even if you're being forced to take a break right now, that's part of the journeying as well. So no matter, whatever one you need to hear, you need to balance those two out, right? And I'll end off that the truth is that Masei, the idea of an infinite growth, an infinite journeying that we learn about the journeys from Mitzrayim depends on the Matos, on the descent. They're really connected to one another. That in the concept of the ideas of them, that the neshama to get to the level where she comes mahalech, where she's constantly growing. And has infinite growth, depends on first her going down and leaving the state of being a shevet, coming in the world being a mata, because when the neshama, before she comes down in the world, she's an omed, she's not able to have that growth. And that's the ultimate Yeridu L'Tzorech Aliyah, that the neshama, through coming down to this world, she's now able, and weathering the struggles, she's now able to be a staff that can now go and travel and keep going and in infinite levels because of the struggles she's gone through, that a perfect angel could never be able to have that growth without struggle. There's no growth without struggle. If everything is perfect, there's no room to grow. So the struggle is necessary to have that ability to grow that the angels yearn for. And even after neshama passes away, she is now able to continue climbing higher and higher. Once neshama continues into Gan Eden, a neshama is different than an angel. After she's come down to the world, she's never the same. Her growth is infinite. She can grow levels. And one of the ways is by us doing things for the neshama above every time. And the neshama meriting from the mitzvos and deeds you did in this world, and by us doing merits in schus and of your friend and all the neshamos that we're doing things for. And yeah, and Matos is, and the way that Matos, the Masei is felt in Matos is that we said earlier that even in the struggles when we're being formed and we're being pushed and we're having all these difficulties and these chaos, in that moment, if we could feel that it's for the purpose of the Masei and the growth, and that even now we can already feel the journey and the growth that's happening now, then hopefully we can have that magic perception to be able to see that in the struggles, and that will lessen the pain of it and take out what's really needed from it, which is the resilience, the growth, the power, the kochos, the empathy, and all the things that we need to take out from it. So even the rest are journeys, and even the journeys are rest. L'chaim, I bless all of us, right? To be strong, to be resilient, to be ever growing, and to have all the kochos that we need to weather any difficulty that God forbid Hashem sends our way. To be able to keep climbing to higher heights, and be rejoined in this land with everyone that we love very, very soon. Thanks for joining.
It's very powerful.
What?
Yeah, we know really good.